Hi, I'm DiMatteo. Thanks for taking a few minutes to go over some of the basics, some of the quality assurances, and some of the fundamental principles behind omega-3 800s. I've talked about it often on the radio broadcast. I believe in it. I take them myself. My family takes them. We're going to cover a couple areas today. The quality issues, and I'll break that out for you. And then what are the applications? How do you use them? What does your body use them for? What are the benefits? Is there any benefit at all? So let's start off with the quality issues, because I believe that's number one. There's boatloads of different types of omega quote-unquote fish oils. I won't get into concentrations all that much today, but that is an issue as well. Let's start with quality first. Number one, the forms that we use are pelagic oils or pelagic fish. That means a couple of things. Number one, they're not in intercoastal or coastal areas. They're at sea. For example, tuna, salmon, sardine, anchovy, cod, etc. They're short-lived. These are short-lived pelagic fish where you do not have a lot of accumulation of toxic components, PCBs, heavy metals, etc. Number two, they are food grade to start. In other words, when this oil is actually being extracted and taken from the fish, there's either feed grade, which most manufacturing processes use, which in other words, in essence, mean that it's used for other fish or other animals as feed, or food grade. We use food grade, higher quality to begin with. Let's get into how the process is done. What's in the process? Molecular distillation is key. We use a triple molecular distillation process. Part of that takes into account using an organic filtration process. The downside with a lot of other manufacturing processes is that they use chemical or heat extraction. Now, when I say the problem with that is, how does that hurt you as the consumer, you the ultimate end user? In a couple of areas. With chemical or heat extraction, the oils are denatured, they're broken down. That's not what we want. We want those oils to be very minimal in what are called peroxide and aniside values. In other words, the oils haven't degraded or begun to break down, actually creating more oxidative stress and trauma to your body than what we want to do, the very opposite. So, pelagic. Number two, food grade versus feed. Molecular and organic filtration. It is a triple molecular distillation process versus, or as opposed to, what is done in the industry is heat extraction, chemical extraction. The reason why that's done is because it's less expensive, it's less time consuming, you can process more oils. The molecular distillation, the organic filtration is more expensive, more time consuming, but you have a higher quality end product. As far as the facility goes, the manufacturer that we use is a pharmaceutical manufacturer. They're not even a nutraceutical manufacturer. They qualify with NSF and GMP certifications, of which there are only 2 oil manufacturers in the world that subscribe to both of those. It's a pharmaceutically licensed facility. Most other facilities are, not that there's anything wrong with that, they're nutraceutically licensed. This is a pharmaceutically licensed manufacturer that we use. A key area, a couple of years ago, there were some issues regarding the quality of omega-3 oils. In other words, how much contamination was allowed. There were random tests done to multiple, probably 20 different products on the market. What they found is that many of these products that were analyzed had anywhere from 20 to 200 times the amount of allotted contaminants. That would be PCBs, BCAs, metals, mercury, etc. Ours actually falls 20 times below California Proposition 65, which is pretty much the standard that is used even from a federal standpoint. And what that means to you, 20 times less or lower than California Proposition 25 or 65, where the bulk of the other manufacturers went anywhere from 20 to a couple hundred times higher than that, simply comes down to this one issue. The amount of contaminant that is in our product comes down to literally 1/billionth of a gram on a daily basis, or less than 90 nanograms per day. That is infinitesimal. Not many manufacturing facilities can boast that. So number one, we talk about the quality assurances. You use the omega-3 800 you are guaranteed some very, very key things. The quality is there, molecular distillation, it is pelagic in origin, you have a molecular organic filtration process, you do not have chemical or heat extraction that denatures, breaks down, and causes elevated peroxide values. What's the application? What do I mean by application? Why would you want to use omega-3 800s? Because I'm selling you a product. No, I'm not just selling you a product. I use them. My family uses them. There are health benefits. So let's start breaking down what those benefits are. If we look at the typical American with their lifestyle, their dietary issues, the ratio of the omega-3 to omega-6s, now we need some omega-6s and omega-9s, but most Americans have a ratio of anywhere from 15 to 1 up to 20 to 1 in the ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s. The reality of it is you should be down around 3 to 1 in that ratio. So most Americans, because of the amount of rancid types of fats or deep fried fats or processed foods and processed sugars, the wrong types of fats, you have a ratio that runs anywhere 10, 15, 20 times what it should be. If you look at most populations that have lowered risk for cardiovascular disease, heart disease, etc., less stroke risk, you see that they consume, just as an example, there are other components to this, but they consume significant amount more in their diet through fish consumption, fish oil consumption, quality other oils such as nuts and seeds, raw nuts and raw seeds, much closer proportion to that 3 to 1 versus more disease-oriented populations that consume that 15 to maybe 20 to 1 ratio. So what's the application? There are a couple key areas, health benefits I'd call them. Number one, the omega oils have natural anti-inflammatory processes. If I could say this from a physical standpoint to our bodies, inflammation is the root of many physical ills and ailments. In what regard? Inflammation will encourage joint destruction and joint breakdown, premature aging of the skin. Cardiovascular issues rise the more inflammatory processes we have in our body. So vis-a-vis how we eat, chemicals that we're exposed to in the environment, we don't detoxify well in many cases, and we certainly do not eat enough of the right types of oils and fats and, unfortunately, antioxidants. So we have a lot of inflammatory processes that are going on in our body. When you're in a pro-inflammatory state, it raises your risk to contract things like cancer, cardiovascular disease, your stroke risk goes up, age-related macular degeneration goes up. There's a whole host of issues. You're more prone to degenerative joint diseases. There are a lot of other issues with that in specifics, but I'm talking in general terms. The key rationale is the inflammatory process. The more inflamed this body is, the greater the incidence of breakdown, disease state orientation. It's very, very simple. And this teaching here is not to be an in-depth 2-hour so you fall asleep. That is not the goal here. The goal is to give you a quick overview so that you understand why you want to use these products. Let's go on to some other, I think, key nuts and bolts of this whole issue with omega-3s. Understand that omega-3s are involved in the structural integrity of your cells, cell membranes, cell fluidity. Your outer layer of your cells have a lipid layer, a fatty lipid layer. And it is made up of, or the consistency is predominantly of the omega-3s. If you consume a lot of hydrogenated fats, saturated animal fats, and not enough of the good fats, what's going to happen, your body will take whatever it can, incorporate those bad fats into your lipid layer, your outer lipid layer. You do not conduct business well. And what I mean by conduct business, that is not a health-promoting state to keep out and shield the cell from toxins and damage, to conduct movement of electrical types of current through the cells, and to bring in minerals and to release bad components and metals from the cell. Structural membrane fluidity. Let's talk specifically. We'll start from an infant. We'll start from the perinatal periods. We know that moms, during the gestation period, especially in that 3rd trimester, very, very key time for a lot of the fetal brain development. Literature shows that the better the ratio of the omega-3s in a mother's body, she has almost a heads up for that child's developmental issues from a neurologic standpoint, from a brain developmental standpoint. Some specific areas that go beyond that: dyspraxia, developmental coordination disorders. It is found that when you raise the ratio or have more of these omega-3 fatty acids in a child with dyspraxia, just as an example, you can begin to improve, some of the studies show up to 30%, their movement and reduce some of their dyspraxic types of situations. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There's literature, and I have all the documentation. I was going to go through and name each and every study for you, but I'm going to do an overview. I feel more comfortable just doing that. ADHD. You find most studies have shown and documented that children with hyperactivity disorder have an imbalanced EPA, DHA to what's called an arachidonic acid ratio. And all that really means is in their red blood cells, they have more bad fats, more dominant bad fats than they have good fats. It has all to do with this whole structural issue, structural cell membrane fluidity, and DHA, which is part of the omega-3s, EPA, DHA. DHA is very, very important for brain development, not only in the mother's womb, but also as we need to continue to develop our brain, maintain focus and attention, and so on. We found that studies show that aggression in teens and in young children is ameliorated when they have a higher ratio of the omega-3s to the arachidonic acid or the bad fats. So literally, aggressive behaviors are mitigated, they're reduced when we change the ratio of these good fats. I'm just going to go on. Autism spectrum disorders. Bradstreet, there's another group of physicians that did some studies, looked also at these omega-3 EPA, DHA ratios to the bad fat ratios, the arachidonic acid. And certainly I'm not going to say that this is causal in autism or that it's causal in dyspraxia, but we do know there's a very profound relationship. And when we begin to change these essential fatty acid ratios, you can improve behavior, coordination, focus, aggression, and so on. Autism spectrum disorders. There are a lot of other issues here. Detoxification pathways, methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase inhibition areas. You change the ratio of good fats. That is a stepping stone. That is one of those basic principles that you can help a child with spectrum disorders. We find now, let's move on to more into, my age grouping. Demential risk is reduced the better the ratio of the omega-3 to arachidonic acid imbalances. EPA, DHA ratios that are higher, people that consume more good fats, use supplemental forms, good forms, have a reduced risk of dementia. Why? Inflammation. I said it at the beginning. What are some of the sticking points here? Why would you want to use quality omega-3s? Inflammation in the body. Well, my joint doesn't hurt, or there's unseen inflammation. C-reactive proteins, HSCRP, highly specific C-reactive proteins, which are more specific to the cardiovascular and the circulatory system. Interleukin-6, interleukin-10, that they are what we call pro-inflammatory markers. When you change the distribution, your diet and quality omegas, you reduce the tendencies for these pro-inflammatory states. In favor of inflammation, you want to rectify that. You want to turn that on its head. You want to have your body in an anti-inflammatory position. And that's what the omegas do in essence. It doesn't work like a drug does to reduce inflammation in your body. What it does is, literally, when you get into synthesis pathways, it moves your body down an anti-inflammatory pathway. You'll make more of the essential fats that reduce the inflammatory pathway, and it literally blocks mechanisms to encourage the bad fat synthesis pathway, which is pro-inflammatory. Now, I want to caution you, I want to qualify. You need a very small level of that arachidonic acid pathway or that pro-inflammatory. But you need a small amount in proportion to the anti-inflammatory. Why do you need small amounts? Because that's kind of an initiation for the immune system. We need that to be happening. When we utilize that ratio, or let's just say this, when that ratio changes, where there's more pro-inflammatory and there's less anti-inflammatory, now I have Pandora's box. Joint destruction, cardiovascular, circulatory issues, age-related macular degeneration goes up, Cancer is at a higher risk. The wheels come off. I'm not going to say that this is the answer to all your ills and all your woes, but there is no doubt the more we can keep your body in an anti-inflammatory state through diet and supplementation, you'll typically live a healthier, longer, more functional life, neurologically, physiologically, etc. Let's just move on. Bipolar disorders and schizophrenia. There's literature that was written up back in 1999, American Journal of Psychiatry, where they used with bipolar patients, a group of them. Some were on meds, some were not on meds, some were being managed through counseling, others were being managed by meds and counseling. Mega doses of the omega-3, high doses EPA, DHA. They found there were significant improvements in the Hamilton rating, the HAM-D scores, the Hamilton rating depression scores across the board, whether they were on meds or not on meds. Functionally, it can improve your state, I don't want to say your state of mind, but your depressive types of tendencies are reduced with quality when you start to change that ratio. Suicide risk. Dr. Sublett, New York, Columbia University, New York City, documented that when suicide patients were evaluated, when they took red blood cell analysis and measured the DHA levels, they found that individuals that had attempted or had committed suicide, they had a much lower ratio of DHA in their red blood cells versus those that obviously that had not. There was a huge disproportionate ratio of DHA and EPA actually as well, but DHA in particular to bad fats. Now, are there other factors that are involved with depression and bipolar? Absolutely. Are there other factors that we're not even aware of? Absolutely. Are there other issues with schizophrenia, such as gluten and wheat intolerance? Yes, absolutely. But this becomes a tool, a very critical tool that can help you, whether you're on medications or not, to improve psychologic, neurologic types of function, whether it's depression, whether it's attention deficit disorders, whether it's a child with autism spectrum disorders. It's not the answer in and of itself. It's a key tool. Joints. If I'm working with someone that has a lot of joint issues, has a lot of destructive joint issues, I'm going to use quality forms, the right forms of glucosamine. I'm going to use the right forms of chondroitin. And there are high molecular weight forms. There are standardized, purified forms of glucosamine to feed the joint. But what I'm also going to do is talk to you about reducing the inflammatory process. Watch your whites, watch your sugars, watch your refined, watch your bad fats, and also add to your regime, besides the joint essentials, something like the omega-3 800s. Cancer risk is reduced. Lots of different studies showing there's less cancer incidence with an improved ratio of the essential fatty acids. By the way, essential fatty acid, essential meaning that you cannot synthesize, it must come through your diet. An essential amino acid means that you can't synthesize that particular one. You can make certain amino acids. Essential ones have to come from the diet so that you can convert to others. Essential fatty acids meaning they must come in through the diet. You do not synthesize or make these. That's a key point that I'd like to bring up. Your immune response is greatly enhanced with the right ratio of essential fatty acids. Immune system is improved. Cancer cachexia, meaning when patients are undergoing chemotherapy and radiation regimes and cancer is attempting to ravage their bodies, one of the things that happens is cachexia. The body breaks down. There is a tremendous amount of inflammation, one, and cachexia or breakdown of the skeletal structure, of the muscular structure. When you can reduce that, these patients have longer lives. They have a higher quality of life in many cases, even in severe cases. It's documented to reduce cancer cachexia. I mentioned earlier, age-related macular degeneration, clearing away. High sugar diet, high refined fat, or high refined whites, and a lot of bad fats, higher rates of macular degeneration. You reduce those areas, and higher ratio of omega-3s, EPA, and especially DHA, lower incidence of macular degeneration, which actually leads eventually to blindness. Autoimmune conditions, whether it's lupus, whether it's inflammatory bowel, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis, whether it's psoriasis, these are all related or have a link or have a core conduit to an autoimmune self-attacking scenario. There are a lot of other things that have to be done, but part of your tool bag to work in this area are the omega 800s. Cardiovascular effects, decreased stroke risk, your HDLs can be improved, your LDLs can be lowered, there's less inflammation, as I had mentioned before, in the circulatory system. Your platelet aggregation is diminished. That means your platelets are less sticky. Your blood is less sticky. Your blood flows more efficiently. It has an anti-inflammatory effect to the cardiovascular, the circulatory system. And what we also know that it does, that high ratio, believe it or not, of DHA, which is always believed to be a brain and an eye issue, and it's not really been thought of for years as being a cardiovascular protective, wrong. DHA helps, as well as the EPA, helps to stabilize plaque formation. So that even plaque that has formed on your vessel and artery walls, you can help to stabilize them so there's less incidence of that plaque breaking off and moving and occluding, blocking one of your tiny arterioles. Cardiovascular benefits are huge. That about covers the omega-3 800s. I could spend probably 2 hours and go into great detail. Just so you know, we have with each and every one of our product scenarios that when we have them manufactured, we have certificate of analysis. Every contaminant, every possibility that can possibly be in the essential fatty acids, we have an analysis and a C of A each and every time.